Eventually, Miami was going to lose a game. Miami was never going to finish this season undefeated. I was not shocked that they lost to Louisville, especially when you know who Louisville has as their head coach, Jeff Brohm, a.k.a. the Upset Master. And the Upset Master once again went to work. Jeff Brohm came into South Florida and Hard Rock Stadium with a point to prove. Louisville's first drive, they're throwing out 3 quarterbacks on the field, confusing Miami's defense. Then they pull off the smoothest fake field goal that you will ever see on 4th and 2. Then they cap the first drive off, scoring a touchdown with the tush push. Louisville and Jeff Brohm, they brought the fight to Miami. This was a game that Miami simply wasn't going to be able to win unless the coaching was up to par, and it wasn't. Mario Cristobal and his staff, Jeff Brohm was coaching circles around them. Jeff Brohm, if there ever was a lead candidate for Penn State, now that Curt Cignetti and Lane Kiffin are out the mix, it has to be him. If you're looking for somebody that's going to have your team ready to play in big games, especially against top 10, top 5 ranked opponents, which is the biggest grudge that Penn State had against James Franklin, being unable to win those games, Jeff Brohm is your guy. Unfortunately, Jeff Brohm isn't going anywhere. He was born and raised a Louisville native. And I remember a few years ago, back in 2018, when Purdue destroyed and dismantled Ohio State when they had Dwayne Haskins at quarterback, RIP. Jeff Brohm was the coach of Purdue when that happened. He also pulled off an upset a few years ago against Michigan when they were ranked inside the top 10. You don't get the name, the moniker Upset Master without a good reason. And Jeff Brohm lives up to that name. Carson Beck, he didn't do Miami any favors in this game. He essentially threw 5 interceptions. One of them just didn't get called because of a penalty, which bailed him out. Carson Beck, it looked like we saw him revert back to the Carson Beck that we saw last year. And you can't blame Shannon Dawson's play calling for Carson Beck's 4 awful interceptions. The guy was just throwing deep balls downfield, and he was underthrowing them. You might as well have just put Malachi Tony back there at quarterback. Hell, he threw a better pass, that touchdown that he threw, than what Carson Beck threw all night long. If anything, Miami should be running their offense for the remainder of this season through Malachi Tony. Every time Miami puts the ball in Malachi Tony's hands, great things happen. You might as well just let Malachi Tony play Wildcat quarterback. He essentially has carried Miami's offense throughout the course of this season. We're all talking about how good Carson Beck was, but maybe that was due to how good Malachi Tony was. Malachi Tony not only has been the best true freshman wide receiver in college football, I will argue and tell you that Malachi Tony has been the best receiver in college football. Better than Ryan Williams, better than Mekhi Lemon, better than Jeremiah Smith. There's not a single wide receiver right now that I would take over Malachi Tony. He's been bailing out Carson Beck. And when Malachi Tony couldn't bail out Carson Beck against Louisville, you saw what happened. Miami doesn't control their own destiny anymore. Even if they're able to win out, if Virginia and Georgia Tech finish the season undefeated, Miami will be left out of the ACC championship once again. And this is why I was hesitant to fully buy into Miami this year. I still believe full-heartedly that last year was Miami's best shot to make it to the playoffs, to win the ACC, and to compete for a national championship. Cam Ward was a generational quarterback. He was the best quarterback to ever put on a Hurricanes uniform. And only one season with the program, Cam Ward not only resurrected the U, but he broke all kinds of records. He should have won the Heisman Trophy last year. If you bring back the U, you resurrect Miami football, you put Miami back into national prominence, you deserve to win the Heisman. Nobody has been able to have the success at quarterback that Cam Ward has. And we thought that Carson Beck wasn't going to be too far off from Cam Ward. But what we saw out of Carson Beck against Louisville, we saw him in all of his limitations. We've seen the good out of Carson Beck for most of this season, and we saw the downright ugly out of Carson Beck against Louisville. Now, I don't think Carson Beck's going to have another performance this year where he throws 4 interceptions. It's pretty hard to throw a season's worth of interceptions in one game unless you're just making boneheaded decisions like what Carson Beck was making. He was throwing interceptions that were just inexcusable. I can tolerate an interception where a guy undercuts the route or a guy just reads the play all the way through. But one interception that you can't tolerate is the one when guys are just chugging up goal balls, even though the guy's not open. F it, he's somewhere down there. I'm going to throw it anyway, even though he's covered. That's what Carson Beck was doing, and it costed Miami. Carson Beck is not a quarterback that can will Miami to a win like how Cam Ward had the ability to do last year when Miami was down on the road against Cal. Cam Ward took over that game. Carson Beck doesn't have that ability. And Jeff Brohm said it perfectly in his post-game interview. He said that Carson Beck is a really good quarterback. But if you get Miami playing from behind and you get them having to throw the ball with Carson Beck a lot more than what they would like to, it's a recipe for disaster. That's what Louisville's game plan was. And all week long, the deciding factor, what Miami fans thought was going to dictate the outcome of this game, was the monsters that they had on line of scrimmage. How big and how athletic Miami's offensive line and defensive line was compared to Louisville. But what we overlooked was that Louisville's offensive line wasn't too far off from Miami's. As a matter of fact, number 74, Jordan Church, one of my homies from FAU, was going to work against Miami's defensive line. I was so happy to see my boy out there doing this thing. Mario Cristobal might have to give my dude Church a call after this season and offer him a big bag. Say, hey, bro, I know you're at Louisville, but how about you come down to South Florida and come play for me, play for IMG. His freshman year on campus at FAU, he already looked like he was starting material. I was shocked that he didn't start right away. And then he goes to Louisville, and all of a sudden the dude looks like Hercules. I mean, he was working Miami's defensive line. The entire offensive line of Louisville was going to work against what was supposed to be the best defensive line in college football, which I still think they hold the title of that. But Ruben Bain and the other elite edge rushers that Miami has, they were nowhere to be found. They were unable to slow down Louisville's rushing attack. And anytime Louisville needed a big play, they got it. And defensively, Louisville didn't really have to do too much. They just had to let Carson Beck be the Carson Beck that we saw last year at Georgia. And it's funny how last year when Carson Beck was playing for Georgia, he was tossing up all those atrocious interceptions like what he was against Louisville. Everybody wanted Mike Bobo fired. Carson Beck is now gone from Georgia, and all of a sudden, nobody's complaining about Mike Bobo's play calling. But all of a sudden, we see Carson Beck implode against Louisville, and now Shannon Dawson is the problem. Coaches coach and players make plays. What the hell is Shannon Dawson supposed to call when you got Carson Beck out there with tunnel vision? Shannon Dawson isn't the dude out there playing quarterback. He's not the dude throwing the ball into triple and quadruple coverage. So how is Shannon Dawson the reason why Miami lost to Louisville? I don't think that Shannon Dawson's play calling was why Miami lost to Louisville. Oh, well, he's running too much power, too much inside zone. That's Mario Cristobal's offense. Mario Cristobal wants to run the football down your throat in the middle of your defensive line. He's all about imposing his will up the middle of the defense. Nobody was criticizing how much Miami liked to spam the inside run up until they lost to Louisville the other night. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's Miami's identity, running the football up the middle of the defense, up the gut. But all of a sudden, it doesn't work for one game, and the play calling is too predictable. Nobody ever complains about the play calling when it's working. Nobody talks about how predictable the play calling is when the plays are successful. But when Miami's quarterback tosses out 4 interceptions, all of a sudden, the offensive coordinator needs to go. The play calling sucks. Like I said, I would never have high expectations as long as I'm alive as a Miami fan, with Mario Cristobal being the head coach, elite recruiter, subpar game day coach. Jeff Brohm with a less talented team, spending less money on his roster, was coaching circles around Miami. Now, I don't believe that this season is over. I mean, you guys got me to apologize a few weeks ago, so I'll be damned if I'm about to just say the season's already over for Miami after one loss. When Miami plays SMU 2 weeks from now, that's going to be the game that tells us everything that we need to know about how Mario Cristobal's tenure in Miami is going to go. Because you once again are going up against a really good coach that excels at pulling off upsets in Rhett Lashlee. And Rhett Lashlee has JV Miami. SMU is kind of like Miami Light, because it seems like every player that washes out or doesn't work out at the U ends up going to Rhett Lashlee, and he ends up getting the most out of them. If you look at Rhett Lashlee's coaching staff, De'Aaron King is his quarterback coach. Tyler Van Dyke is a graduate assistant. It's funny how every player that Rhett Lashlee got the most out of when he was Miami's offensive coordinator is still with him. That's a sign that you have a very good coach. And anytime Mario Cristobal goes up against above average or better head coach, he comes out on the losing end more times than not. I'm not a Mario Cristobal hater. Just because I'm a Miami fan doesn't mean that I have to be blatantly optimistic about this team for the sake of being optimistic. I tell it how it is. I tell the truth. If you guys want to go and get some water cooler talk, telling you everything you want to hear positive about Miami, there's plenty of other channels that do that. But over here on JT Sports, we're going to keep it real and we're going to keep it trill. And I've been telling you guys before the season started that I had a hard time drinking the Miami Hurricanes Kool-Aid, because anytime this team gives you a reason to be optimistic, within a snap of a finger, they erode all of that optimism that you had. And we haven't even gotten to the point of the season that Miami normally starts to collapse at. Normally, Miami starts losing around November. The final 4 weeks of the season is when Miami starts to unravel. Well, maybe they're unraveling a month early. You play Stanford. You should win that game. But how does Miami look after a loss? That's the question I have. How's this team going to respond? You can say that losing to Louisville, what's the best thing that happened to Miami? I may say the opposite. Maybe losing to Louisville was the sign of what's to come with this team falling short once again of making it to the ACC championship and reaching the college football playoffs. Louisville is the first good team that Miami has played this year, other than Notre Dame. Notre Dame looks to be really good now. Notre Dame, at the time you played them during week 1, they weren't as good as what they are now. Their quarterback was starting his first ever game. They forgot that Jeremiah Love existed for some reason. Now Notre Dame's looking like a well-oiled machine. If Notre Dame was to run it back with Miami again, would Miami win? I don't know. I'm not saying that they wouldn't, but I'm not saying that they would. Maybe Miami peaked too early. Maybe we saw the best of this year's Miami team the first month and a half of this season. And now with Miami getting into the meat and potatoes of their conference schedule, going up against teams that have good talent and good coaching, you're no longer beating up on the Florida States of the world. You're actually going up against the teams that are going to be in the mix for the ACC championship, possibly. You lose to Louisville. Now I start raising my eyebrows. Now I start asking for my apology from you Miami fans that are saying I was a hater. You were saying I'm not a real Miami fan. What's up now? How do you feel about Miami? Now everybody's all up in arms. Now everybody wants changes to be made. Now everybody doesn't believe in the Miami hype train anymore, when I've been telling you guys this for over the last 3-4 months. And it took losing Louisville for people to finally look at the red flags that Miami had that everybody wanted to ignore for the sake of just being blatantly optimistic. I'm not one of those people, especially if I'm putting money down on these games. And I took Louisville plus 13.5. I was yelling at my homeboy all week long that Louisville was not only going to cover, They had a shot at winning this game because they had the upset master Jeff Brohm as their head coach. In Paris, if you're listening to this, I told you so. I didn't text you. But if you're listening to this, which I know you are, I told you that Louisville was going to win this game. Remember when you was like, Jeff Brohm, who? The upset master? Man, I don't know who the hell that is. I bet you know who Jeff Brohm is now. I bet you put some more respect on the upset master now. Still love you, my brother, but I tried to tell you about Miami. Now, I thought that we possibly would see them lose to Florida State since that was a rivalry game and it was on the road in Doak. And although I picked Miami to win that game, I thought that game would have been a lot closer than what it was. But I wasn't wrong. I wasn't denied. I was just delayed. Delayed gratification. And the delayed gratification when it comes to my criticisms of Mario Cristobal are coming back into fruition. I still believe Miami can finish this season 2-10, possibly 11-1, but it all hinges on their game against SMU in 2 weeks from now.